Hello and welcome to Coffee with the Disability Guys podcast. I am your host, Brian Mittman, and I am happy to be presenting a topic today that is of much importance to the world, to the United States in general, and even to our workforce. And I have with me my dear friend and colleague, Marc Karlin of Karlin and Karlin, a nationwide immigration law firm. And today we are going to be discussing the basics of immigration, what's really behind all the news, the reality of what it all means, and how we as a team can best help you out, since both Marc's firm and Markoff and Mittman, the Disability Guys, have now teamed up to provide immigration legal services throughout the United States. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my friend Marc. And Marc, welcome on board.
Thank you, Brian. Again, I'm Marc Karlin of Karlin and Karlin, practicing immigration law throughout all 50 states. And if you'd like, I can give a little background about myself.
That'd
Brian.
be fantastic.
Thank you. I've been a lawyer for a number of years. We won't say how many, but more than 30. Our firm has been practicing immigration law for over 40 years. The firm was founded by my late father, Philip, who is a certified expert in immigration law. And so we have a long track record of helping immigrants and their families from every part of the globe. And where I'm fortunate as an immigration attorney is one of the few areas of law where I can practice throughout all 50 states. So glad to be with you, Brian, and glad to discuss the always timely topic of U.S. immigration law.
Fantastic. And for those that might be wondering, what the heck do a disability and workers' compensation attorney and an immigration attorney have in common? While we are friends, come from some very similar backgrounds, even though we're on each side of the United States. I'm here in New York and Marc is currently out in Los Angeles. But more importantly, injured workers, their families, and just workers in general, we see a lot of people who are of immigrant background. I personally am of an immigrant background, as are, I think, everybody. So we hear a lot of things out there, and let's get started. One of the big topics I always you hear on the news, whether they make it the boogeyman or not, is, oh, do you have a green card?
Right.
Did you get a green card? What is a green card, and what is this all about?
Sure. Green card is a phrase that was used probably 50, 70, 80 years ago when someone became a legal permanent resident of the United States. I'll explain what that is in a minute. They were given a card, like a driver's license, and it was the color green. It is now, the card went through many variations, and it's now back to almost being a green card. But having a green card means that you become a legal permanent resident of the United States. And that means that, as it says, you can live in the US permanently, you can work, you can travel, you can come in and out of the US. So there's a couple steps to immigration. There's coming here on a visa, which is generally temporary. There's having a green card, being a legal permanent resident. And then after so many years, if you so desire, and you've held your green card in good standing, you can become a US citizen. But a green card is really the first step to permanently moving to the United States.
From what I hear from friends of mine that are immigrants and have gone through the green card process, it can be long and arduous, but it is super important because, again, as you said, so many people want to come here to the United States, the American dream. So, how do you go about it? Let's say somebody says, oh, I want to get my green card. I've been here somehow. Give us like the basic steps that you would explain to somebody that steps into your office and wants to find out if they can become eventually a U.S. citizen.
Sure. First step is, how did you come into the U.S.? Did you come in on a tourist visa? Did you come in on a student visa? Did you come in on some employment visa? Did you come in without authorization? That's the first step. And then we can analyze the person's prospects based on how they entered the United States, which is crucial. But let's say that, for example, someone came in on a student visa and then now wants to get married to a United States citizen. That's a fairly straightforward process because a US citizen can sponsor his or her spouse, and there is no limit on the number of green cards that are given to spouses of U.S. citizens. Here in Southern California, where I am today, we have a lot of people who live here that were born in Mexico, and some that came across the border without authorization and eventually marry U.S. citizens. Well, there is a process, even though that person may have came into the United States without authorization, there is a process which we can help them get a green card based on their marriage to a U.S. citizen. But most green cards, if they're family-based or there is a sponsoring U.S. citizen relative, be it a son, a daughter, a parent, or a spouse. So that's generally how our clients get their green cards, through their families. There's other ways I can talk about in a minute, but that's primary way is through a family.
So just to be clear, so it sounds like there's a process here to begin with, and I want to be super clear. So, what are the benefits of having a green card? Like, why would somebody go through all this? So they're here as a student, they meet the love of their life, they get married, all is good, but what's the big deal? They have their passport from their country, they have a spouse who's a U.S. citizen, maybe they eventually have kids who are U.S. citizens. What's the big deal?
Big deal is it gives you a sense of permanency, in that if you're here on a student visa, for example, you are limited on how long you can stay here. You are limited on what type of employment you can seek. You're limited on your travel in and out of the U.S. But with a green card, you can work here permanently, you can travel in and out of the United States permanently, and you just have the peace of mind that your status is settled. That's the most important thing. It gives you peace of mind. And that's what we try to give all our clients, is peace of mind.
Absolutely, especially if you've been working here for a while,
right?
And you're acting like any other regular person.
Correct. Right. And your employer is obligated to verify that you are authorized to work in the U.S. So having a green card, that solves that problem.
The I-9 form.
That's it.
Okay. So you mentioned that there's unlimited availability. I am assuming it doesn't mean that you as a U.S. citizen can marry lots of people and give them green cards, but you actually mean that there's no cap on the number of green cards that can be issued for marriage, for parents of a U.S. citizen,
and minor children, right? Minor children.
But there are some restrictions. So if you're not, if you don't have a parent who's a U.S. citizen, if you don't have minor children who are citizens, or if you're not getting married, what would those restricted types be?
Say, for example, you're the sibling of a U.S. citizen. That U.S. citizen can apply for you, but green cards in that category are limited as to the country where you were born. Also, what's going on in the immigration system at that time when you apply, how many green cards are available. So if you're a sibling or if you're an adult child of a U.S. citizen, there are limitations on that. So you just have to wait a while until your turn comes up.
So if I understand correctly, and I'm going to make this up out of, the air, right. If you are, I don't know, you are from Guyana, right? Okay. And you have a sibling who's a U.S. citizen.
Correct.
There are a limited number of green cards that the U.S. allows people from Guyana to immigrate to the U.S.
It allows, there's limited to allow their siblings to immigrate to the U.S. Okay. So if it's a U.S. citizen has a Guyanese parent, there's always a green card generally available for that parent. But if you're, say, a 35-year-old sister from Guyana of a U.S. citizen, you can make the application, but it may be a while before your green card's available.
Interesting. Yeah. So other than that way to get a green card, which seems to make a lot of sense, right? We want to promote families together and, and all of that. Are there other ways to get a green card?
There are employment-based green cards, something called the labor certification process, which we could spend a whole nother half hour on. But there definitely is a way for an employer to sponsor you. And the employer has to prove to the government that they're unable to find a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident to take the specific job, to fulfill rather the specific job opening that they have. That's one way. There's also a process we might hear about, H-1B, which is like the first step towards getting a green card. And that's where companies sponsor someone from overseas who generally has a college degree or higher to come fill a specialized position in the US. There's also a couple other avenues. One is called a U visa, which is if you're in the United States, even if you came in without authorization, if you've been the victim of certain crimes, generally violent crimes, you may be eligible through the U visa process to obtain a green card. There's another process called, it's an act called the Violence Against Women Act. We call it VAWA. That's where, unfortunately, if you were in a relationship with a US citizen and you were abused by that US citizen, be it if you're the spouse, child, or parent of a US citizen, in certain cases, you also may qualify for a green card through the VAWA program. So there's a couple different ways other than a direct family member.
And so in the labor one, that's interesting. So
Right.
in this day and age, while we're recording this, we have super low unemployment,
Right.
a super high need for employees.
Correct.
So we should, I mean, theoretically, potentially see a increase in
Yes.
immigration because we need people to fill those jobs.
Absolutely. I think with the unemployment rates, 2-3%, and there are many specialized jobs that are going unfulfilled, and there are plenty of qualified potential employees overseas who it would only benefit all of us if they were allowed to come and work in the US.
And I'm curious, not in terms of legal fees, but what are our like government fees
Sure.
for this type of process for the green card? Because obviously, and we'll talk about this at another time, there are legal fees involved, and I'm
Right.
going to plug us as attorneys.
Right.
You know, you wouldn't want to fix an engine on your car if you didn't have training, so you don't want
Correct.
to go through the process without being guided by somebody like yourself. But what are the actual governmental fees that are charged for a green card?
Sure. That depends on the application. All in, there's various forms and applications that have to be filled out as part of the green card process. It's about $1,700, but that fluctuates because the government can change the fees. You know, I think with 30 days notice, they can change the fees. They usually go
Nice.
up, not down. But all in, it's about $1,700.
So that's important to know because obviously nothing's free, as they say.
No,
free lunches.
and you know the U.S. immigration system is set up so it is primarily funded by the fees it charges for applications. So unlike other government departments, it is basically fee based.
Interesting.
Mhm.
So
You know what's really also important, Brian, is that you make a mistake and it's immigration. Let me just say this: the application process can be sometimes a little bit long. It's also complicated, and if you make a mistake, your application gets sent back to you, and you have to start really back at one, you know, at square one again. And it's so frustrating for many people who do come to us because they've tried to do the application by themselves, or they've gone to other attorneys or offices who aren't very helpful. And it is so important to have your application done right, have it reviewed multiple times before it goes out so that it doesn't get rejected for the slightest thing. And that happens to a lot of people. It's super frustrating and it's super time consuming.
So you mentioned something there, which is really interesting because I see this in some other areas of law
Right.
as well as myself. You're an attorney, I'm an attorney.
Correct.
But in some areas I practice and in immigration, do you have to be an attorney to help somebody or not?
It's interesting. In California, there are people who are licensed document preparers, but and I'm sure that's the same in tax and in other areas. But that's a really gray area where you're dealing with people who didn't go to law school, who don't have any certification as to their qualifications about the knowledge of immigration law, which, by the way, immigration law changes all the time. And it changes yearly and can change dramatically. But yes, we do here in California and other states, there are offices where they hold themselves out as document preparers. And unfortunately, we do get a lot of clients who have gone there first and come to us with a application that has a lot of mistakes and most likely has been sent back from the Immigration Service.
Yeah, we definitely see that out here in New York. Again, yeah, I'm not sure what the official title is, but there are definitely folks out there that are not attorneys. And some people I'm sure are good, but you have to be very careful as you go through this process, even by the attorney that you pick
Absolutely.
out and hire. So interesting. So is there there's another area that you and I were speaking about before we got on the show today. You were talking about waivers. And so you mentioned this before, and I just want to clarify some language that we're using before we get into that.
Right.
What we hear in the news is illegal immigrants, right? And it's really not that it's illegal, it's you're undocumented.
Correct.
Meaning that you don't have the proper documentation.
Correct.
So technically it could be illegal. Okay, whatever that means, but really we're referring to undocumented folks that came here, and it can be the typical thing that people think, somebody running across the border. But in a lot of cases, it's a regular person who overstayed their student visa, was here on a travel visa, was here on a work visa. They all expire. My daughter is abroad now working, and she's on a visa, and I'm panicked because her visa is coming up. And I said, is it all set? Are you getting it set? Are you,
Right.
you know, so if somebody is here undocumented, their visa expired or they came in improperly, you know, what can they do to try to get a green card at that point?
There's a couple of things, and thank you for clarifying what that means. You know, we don't like the term illegal because it's not illegal if they are here without documentation, or it's also called without authorization. And yes, it could be people who cross the border without permission, but the great majority of people, as you pointed out, overstayed, came in with legal permission, but overstayed. So depending on their circumstance, the best way is if they get married or have some relationship to a U.S. citizen that's going to sponsor them. And there are various waivers which we prepare, waiver documents and waiver requests, we prepare on behalf of our clients to say to the Immigration Service, yes, this person is here currently without authorization, but it would be an extreme hardship to their U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident spouse or other family member if they were forced to go back. Because as you pointed out, really the goal of immigration is family unity. And so there are waivers of someone who's here without status, generally as part of the application process by a U.S. citizen or legal permanent resident relative to sponsor them.
So, I mean, that's good that there's that opportunity there.
There is. It expanded during the Obama administration. It was not surprisingly cut back during the Trump administration. And, it's still going strong with the Biden administration. And many of the applications that we process are green card applications with a waiver attached, a waiver request. So it's a pretty common procedure that we utilize here at our office.
Interesting. And is there anything else that somebody should know about the, I want to make sure I get the language right here.
Right.
The legal permanent resident program or the green card
Sure.
program? Like, what would be the top three things, or is there something that we haven't spoken about that's really important?
One thing is that you're not supposed to leave the U.S. for longer than 6 months. So let's say you now have a green card, but you're not supposed to then go and live either in your home country or outside the U.S. for more than 6 months, because if you do, the government assumes now that you are abandoning your intent to live permanently in the U.S., hence the name legal permanent resident. You can apply, let's say, for example, your husband or a family member gets transferred to a job overseas, or as part of your job, you have to go overseas for longer than 6 months. Well, there is a process then to notify the government of your intent to leave for more than 6 months and get permission to go. But one of the biggest problems we see is people who get green cards think that it is permanent, it'll never go away. And then they move outside the US for 2 or 3 years and have a big issue when they come back. So that's number one. Number two is always pay your taxes, always be above board on any dealings with the government. And number three, don't get convicted of any crimes, because although you have, well, there are exceptions, but it makes our life difficult as your attorney, our attorneys. If you have a green card and you get convicted of certain crimes, the government can initiate a process to revoke your green card. So those are the top three things. Do not go out of the country for longer than 6 months, pay all your taxes, be above board with all your employment, and please don't get convicted of any crimes.
Good advice. All right. So when we come back from our break, we're going to dive into citizenship.
Great.
Okay, so we just covered legal permanent residency and green cards at a very high level, and that's some really helpful and fantastic information. So thank you, Mark. Now let's talk about kind of the ultimate goal of this entire process, which is really how to become a naturalized citizen, how to become a United States citizen because you've done all the right things. So I assume that a green card is a prerequisite. You have to have that. And kind of what are the rules or whatever, what's the process? If I get my green card today, you call me up and say, Brian, congrats, you're getting your green card. Can I go apply to be a citizen tomorrow?
The answer is no, but let me give you the timelines. You're right. The green card is the first step towards the citizenship process. If you obtained your green card by marriage to a US citizen, on the 3rd year anniversary of obtaining your green card, you can file your citizenship application. If you received your green card through another means, then you can apply for citizenship on the 5th anniversary of the date you were issued your green card. And the process itself, once you file the citizenship application, is about a year. It's different in each part of the country. The timing is different. Your citizenship application will be processed by the nearest immigration office to your residence. So the wait times in New York and California are pretty comparable, but some other states might be longer or shorter, just depending on the volume of applications that each immigration office has at any given time.
So it's really kind of a two-step waiting process. You have your green card. If it was based upon marriage, 3 years, and then you can go ahead and apply, and then it will take another year, more or less, after that. And then if it's all other means, it's 5 years, and then lo and behold, you can apply and become a citizen.
Correct. And the problem. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say. So you see in the movies, the tests and knowing,
Right.
U.S. civics. And in this day and age, I wonder if any U.S. citizens know U.S. civics, but I digress. So after you've made that application, what's the process?
Process is then you go in for fingerprints. The government does a background check on you to make sure nothing's happened. You've had no encounters with the police, or nothing interesting has happened in your past since you got the green card. Then you're eventually called in for an interview, and there are 100 US civics questions they could ask you. You have to get 6 out of 10 correct. But the good news is that there's several iPhone apps to help you study for the test. Also, you can download all 100 questions from the USCIS website and study. So that's the first part of the citizenship interview. It sounds more intimidating than it is. I've probably sat in and on over 100 citizenship interviews. So it's like, when you had to take a final exam at school, you got nervous, but then you realize you know the information. But it's really not that difficult, because you will have about a month to 2 months notice of your interview date and time to study. And
if you fail the test?
Well, you can come back and take it again in about 3 months. So it's not one and done. If you don't pass that part of the test, or the interview rather, if you don't pass the citizenship civics test, you can come back in about 3 months and do it again.
So you have the test that you take, and then, as you said, there's this interview.
Correct.
Again, what is that like? So if you're married to a U.S. citizen,
Right.
are you sitting in a separate room and they're doing the newlywed game where they're asking you what's your husband's favorite color and things like that?
That's generally when you're applying for a green card
Okay.
with your spouse, because they want to see, is this a bona fide marriage, which is what it's called, quote unquote, or did you get married to obtain a immigration benefit? So I have been in those interviews. They do separate on occasion the husband and wife. And the last question is like, well, where did you first meet? Where'd you go on your first date? And they always ask this question. They always ask where you got married. How many people were at your wedding?
Huh.
And, I've had clients who've had giant weddings, people who got married at the Hall of Justice before a clerk. But those are for green card interviews. The citizenship interview is only with the applicant, and if he or she wants to bring along an attorney, they can. Now, if you have had a green card for say 20 years and you're over the age of 50, the civics requirements are less, as is the requirement that you be proficient in with your English skills. So I've had several clients who lived in the US with green cards for 20, 25 years. And by the time they decided to apply for citizenship, those tests and requirements were lessened for them.
You bring up an interesting point. You talked about English proficiency. So living here in a huge metropolitan area, I know a lot of folks who are either bilingual or limited English, yet they've been here almost the entirety of their lives.
Right.
Just because it's, the community you live in, the neighborhood you live in, how comfortable
Absolutely.
you are. So is there really an English test?
There is, let's say you're the typical citizenship applicant, you've been married to a U.S. citizen for 3 years, and now on the 4th year, you're going to have your interview for your citizenship test. Yes, you have to pass a basic English proficiency, which is the immigration officer speaking to you, and within his or her discretion, do you exhibit proficiency? That's how they call it in English. They also ask you to write out a sentence or two of pretty basic English, but that's definitely a component of the citizenship exam, and one that we obviously, when we prepare our clients for the interview, we prepare them for this and do our best to make sure that they will pass the English proficiency test.
And in terms of this testing, this is live testing, correct?
It is live. It is in person. It is somebody sitting across the desk from you in a government office and asking you questions.
Pretty intimidating.
Well, absolutely, and it's always good to have an attorney with you to make sure everything goes well, and also for support.
And coming back to the question I asked you with the green card, attorney fees aside, or representative fees aside, what are the typical citizenship fees that the government charges?
It's about, again, it fluctuates. It could be about $800 more or less, but it fluctuates.
And how long after your interview, or do you find out at the interview whether it's a thumbs up or a thumbs down?
Sure. Good news is now in the post-COVID era, if we really are post-COVID, the officer may tell you, you've now passed and you can come in this afternoon or next week to be sworn in as a U.S. citizen. If the officer believes that he or she needs to review some further information or obtain some further information, they will let you know that at the interview and either tell you this is the information we need and you need to send it back, or they'll say we're going to send you a notice sometime in the future about the information we need. But you will know at the end of the interview whether you pass the civics portion, the English proficiency, and all the other issues. And then it's just a matter of, will you get sworn in quickly in the next week or two, or does the government need further information?
Yeah, and the swearing in process is really cool. One of our key employees had passed her citizenship, and we all went down to see the swearing in ceremony, and sitting in that room where there were literally, I think it was about 30 people, 40 people were being
Right.
sworn in that day. Amazing. I get goosebumps thinking about it now. It really is something special.
And we're sometimes jaded as attorneys, and I can tell you that I get a lump in my chest, and I've seen, several swearing in ceremonies. I still get a lump in not my chest. Don't want to scare anybody. I get a lump in my throat. I get a lump in my throat when at the end of that ceremony, and just the pride and relief on the new citizens' faces is just something to behold.
Yeah, it is fantastic. So thank you for all you do with that. So, you and I were also speaking. So this is a process, right? We're working with workers' compensation, disability. It is a process. Well, the law, for good, better or worse, is a process, and it takes time. So what happens, and does it happen? Does it always work out? Okay, you file, you wait, you do this, you do that, you send some stuff back, you get an answer, you move on. Or are there times that, and what can you do about that, those times where things just don't work out well? Like give us some examples if that happens, and then, what recourse, if any, does somebody have?
The U.S. immigration system is a giant bureaucracy. And there are times when applications just get stuck, that you file everything properly. There's no request by the government for additional evidence. There's no request for an interview. And you make written inquiries, you make phone calls, and sometimes you just can't find out what's going on with your application. That happens quite a bit. We don't know why all the time. Sometimes, again, it's just a bureaucracy. So for several clients, we have filed lawsuits, which are called suits in mandamus, in a federal court, which is a lawsuit which is asking a judge to compel the Immigration Service, USCIS, to make a decision on an application. And we have about a 90% success rate in quickly obtaining, once we file the lawsuit and serving on the government, quickly obtaining a decision on an application. Again, there may be nothing to worry about. It may be no reason why an application gets stuck, but applications do just get stuck in the system. And we call these delay lawsuits. And they happen both on green cards applications, and they happen on citizenship applications.
So just, being the attorney that I am, it might concern me a little bit to kind of kick the bureaucracy in the backside to say, hey, make a decision, because now that person who you've just basically yelled at through the court has to make the decision. Do you find any negatives because of that?
In fact, it's the opposite. I have found that if you're going to take the time to bring this matter to a federal judge's attention, the Immigration Service will quickly and generally favorably look at your file. I've never in my experience had any backlash from the Immigration Service or any other government agency against any of my clients who filed a lawsuit because their application was delayed. It's just, again, it's a giant bureaucracy. And I've actually spoken to immigration officers and asked them that specific question, kind of off the record. Could you tell me, do you guys get upset if we file a lawsuit to move this along? They say, no, we don't. Sometimes we don't even know about it. We just get a call about what the status of the application is. We've never, they'll say in my experience, I've never taken a negative position on any case because someone filed a lawsuit. So that's the good news.
So for somebody who is looking to apply for either their legal permanent residency or for citizenship, we had spoken about things that you can and cannot do when you have your green card. Are there any specific things that can affect a citizenship? Once you're a citizen, are you a citizen? And then if you go and commit a crime, or can it be revoked? What's the deal?
Once you obtain naturalized U.S. citizenship, it is almost impossible for the government to revoke it. You can commit a crime, you can fail to pay your taxes, you could be held to pay child support.
You can be a bad citizen.
You can be a bad citizen. Just like those, anybody who's born here can be a bad citizen. So there are, under certain circumstances, where the government can ask that a federal judge revoke a citizenship of can revoke a naturalized citizen. but that's extremely rare. And I have never been involved in one of those, nor have heard of very many.
So really, the rule in place is obviously you want to be an upright and good citizen, regardless of your status. And leading up to that, whether it's trying to get your green card or after you've gotten your green card, you have to play by the rules and follow the rules. And then when you become a citizen, well, hopefully you continue to follow the rules. But that's basically what it would be.
Hopefully, but it's very secure, very, very secure.
That is good news. Is there anything else that you would want to add that somebody really needs to know about the immigration process at this time?
Everybody's case or situation is different. And a lot of clients come to us and say, well, my uncle got his green card through this way, or my friends across the street, they did it this way. But everyone's different because everyone has a different story, different facts about how they came here, what they've done since they've been in here. So the most important thing is like a lot of things in life, everyone has their own story, and we evaluate each case on the merits of that person's situation.
And I like the fact that you use the fact that people have their own story. I always tell my clients I'm the storyteller if they've hired me, and it's not their day in court, even though it is, or their day before the examiner. It's your opportunity to tell your story, because we're all people and it's all about
Absolutely.
stories.
Absolutely, Brian. So that's the most important thing, is everyone's journey is different, but we've been doing this long enough. We've seen a lot, done a lot, and helped a lot of people, and look forward to helping many more in the future.
Fantastic. So thank you, Marc, for joining us today. I think this was super informative. And for any of those that are out there listening to the Disability Guys podcast and you need more information, we're going to be providing contact information. We have teamed up with the law firm of Karlin and Karlin and the Disability Guys to really provide the best services throughout the United States for folks looking for immigration work and disability work and whatever it may be. And stay tuned. You're going to be hearing a lot more from us.